Hello and welcome to the two-man power trip of wrestling. I'm your host, JP John Paz. With me today, a very special guest, former world-class world television champion, world tag team champion, and six-man tag team champion. He's, of course, Mr. Lance Von Erich. Lance, welcome to the two-man power trip. How you doing?
Hey, how you doing? Nice to be here.
What is going on in your world? What have you been up to?
Well, I'm here between South Africa and Mexico. I've been living outside the United States since I left World Class, actually. So,
Y- You enjoying living in Mexico and out of the States?
yeah, a lot. Especially now watching the politics in the States, it makes me wonder, a lot
Oh,
of,
it's terrible.
yeah, it's crazy.
So what's going on? I guess work in Mexico or just hanging out playing golf?
Both. I actually am in the hotel industry, so, you know, I, I have to be here 7 months out of the year in Mexico, and the rest of the time I can travel.
Very cool. So you don't miss the States at all, I'm guessing.
Well, I was on a 2 month holiday, and part of that was, in the States. So it's nice to come visit. So I was in Nevada and Arizona, and then the first time in I guess 35 years that I've been to also Texas. So I spent a couple of days in Texas.
Wow, what was that like? That's a little bit of a homecoming.
Well, it's kind of strange because I drove by the sportatorium where it was, and God, it's Dallas Fort Worth completely changed. I didn't even recognize it.
Crazy. It's gone, right? Completely the sports store. There's nothing
Yeah,
there, right?
it's nothing there. Yeah,
Wow, that is weird, but that's pretty cool that you were, 35 years later, but you're in the old stomping grounds.
yeah, it's kind of crazy. It brought back some memories. So, and not all of them were good either. So, but it was interesting.
I was going to say good memories are bad, but you like you said, not all good with world class. Still there?
Yeah, I'm out in the middle of nowhere. I'm in the Baja, so I'm trying to actually find a spot that I can get the internet.
Oh yeah, no problem. I was saying like you were saying, not all good memories from world class, obviously.
Well, I was working twice a day, and that was almost every day. So I had no time for myself at all. And it was because the Von Erichs, there was always one of them or two of them missing. So I would do the first match in one town and the main event in the other. It was just overworked. So those times weren't very fun.
Yeah, it seems like that's coming out more and more lately with like Jeff Jarrett and different people were talking about how Kevin doesn't show up, Kerry doesn't show up. Like, you know what I mean? It's starting to get out there more that they were just, I know people knew that, but it just seems to be more out there with like more like casual fans and stuff that they realize those two guys were kind of AWOL for a bit.
Well, it wasn't only them; it was also Mike as well. You know, I mean, when he wasn't hurt, obviously, he was hurt and he was out for a while, but it was like covering for everyone. So it was tough. Wasn't fun, you know, and that's why I actually left.
Too much work, too much going on, just too much pressure on you, I guess, right?
Well, and the money wasn't commensurate with the job. It became something that was kind of fun. When I was in Portland, it was fun. I had a good time, and everyone told me, including Don Owens, don't leave. You need to actually stay here for a couple of years and then go to the W. If I had to do things over, I would have actually taken his advice and go to the WWF instead of going with the Von Erichs. And I thought at the time, that would actually be a great place to go to because I'd get an instant push. But it turned out, it was exactly the opposite. Not the push, but I mean, by kind of ending my career.
So what did Don say? He wanted you to get some more grooming and some more work in PNW?
Yeah, I wasn't on national television. The problem with world class, I was thrown into I wasn't ready, but they needed someone right then or there. It was either go or, at that time, or lose the opportunity. And so, to my detriment, actually, it turned out to be, you know, well, it was to my detriment, because I was pushed into a situation too early, and also uh, being overworked. And so I told, I mean, I don't know how much, your viewers know about what happened to me, but I kind of held them up. I said, listen, I'm leaving, unless you pay me more. And they didn't want to pay me more. And so they were afraid I would go to WWF. So they kind of on television had, you know, that I wasn't a real Von Erich and all that, and I wouldn't have come back. In reality, I wasn't going to come back to the States anyway. I had already set up everything in South Africa for, business and all that. And so, that was a, I kept on wrestling. It's just on the other side of the world.
Yeah, South Africa a lot, right? And you set up a different tours in other countries too, right?
Right. And I had health clubs in South Africa, and I didn't need the money. I was making really good money with the health clubs, and I would only wrestle whenever it suited me. It wasn't like I had to, had to make money. And it makes a big difference in many things. If you don't have to work, and you enjoy working just because you want to do it, makes it a lot more fun.
What did you think when the Von Erichs did that on TV? Because basically they come out, oh, he's not really related. He's not really the Von Erich. What was going through your mind at that point? Like, screw these guys?
Well, I thought, how stupid, because it in reality, looking back, and I wasn't in the States at the time. I just had heard about it. This was all, second. I believe I had just left, and it was all, from other people that told me, that they'd gone on television, on national television. I think it was actually on that Channel 39 that went all over the world. And I just thought, well, it's kind of stupid for them to actually say that, because if they hadn't said anything, I would have just, I would just gone by the wayside, and nobody had not. They could have said anything, but I think it made them look like liars. I mean, I don't see what the purpose of it was, but it is what it is, and that's what they did.
So it was really because you weren't wanting to work there anymore and you wanted more money. That was their way of kind of getting rid of you, even though you kind of already quit.
Yeah, exactly. And that, and again, I think that they thought, that I was going to go to the WWF, and I was actually offered, you know, um, to actually work at the WWF, and and I really didn't have a desire. Looking back, I probably should have, but my life turned. Uh, you kind of get pushed in a way you should have gone in the first place, and I wouldn't have the life that I have now if I had stayed with the Von Erichs. And I know so many wrestlers that are, dirt. I mean, dirt poor. They just have no money whatsoever. And I think that if I stuck around in Dallas, that I might have, ended up that way as well.
Do you think with the WWF you would have succeeded there, or like what was the thought process with not going to WWF?
Wasn't that I just had, I was just, looking back, I was just kind of disillusioned with the whole thing in the States. You know, um, I just, I just felt that I didn't want to go to New York. I didn't really know anybody in New York, and I just didn't have the desire, you know. And I had opportunities elsewhere, and I just thought it would pan out, much better for me. And it might have turned out great at at world, in W at the WWF too. You don't know, but it was a different route I'd taken, and I got to see the world that I don't think I would have seen if I'd done it, the other way around. And I didn't have enough. I still didn't have enough experience, I don't think, to go to the WWF. If I had gone that way, I should have stayed in Portland for a couple more years.
Do you remember who made you the offer for WWF and how that kind of went down?
Yeah, I was in Florida, and actually, I don't know if you've seen. I had actually wrestled a couple of times at the at um, uh, and I can't remember the guy's name. Eddie Mansfield at Universal Studios. He was trying to do a production there, and I'll send you a link to one of the wrestling. And I was actually much better back then when I was wrestling with Eddie. But one of the guys that was promoting the WWF had actually seen me, and I was about 300 pounds. You know, I was taking a lot of steroids. I wasn't able to work out when I was, at world class because I was too busy trying to go to, trying to work. You know, I'd be 8 hours on the road and then coming back home and then having to get up the next day and wrestle in the afternoon someplace, in the evening someplace else. So I had no time for myself or to work out. But anyway, so one of their scouts actually asked me if I would, send them a tape of me wrestling, and I sent them the tape, and they wanted me to actually, come out and meet them, and I just never, I didn't pursue it.
Man, that's would have been like you say, could have been a good opportunity, but obviously, life works out better obviously for you away from wrestling, but it would have been interesting to see you in the WWF late 80s, 90s, like what you would have been. Do you think about that at all? You're like, yeah, whatever. Like wrestling is wrestling.
Well, no, I've thought about it, but again, like I said, that I wouldn't have gone to all the countries that I've gone to, and I wouldn't have traveled the way that I've traveled, and I wouldn't have made the money that I've made. I mean, I spend half my time in Mexico, half my time in South Africa. I got good weather all year round, and I don't think that I would have. Um, I don't think I'd be where I am today if I. And who knows? Again, I also could be dead. You know how many people that I've worked with that are, you know, or dead, especially with world class. You
Yeah.
know, Rick Rude. If you Buzz Sawyer, you on and on. The Von Erichs, all of them. Chris Adams. Matt Boren. Just a onslaught of people. And I was around. At that time, and everybody was doing drugs. Gino Hernandez. And they're all dead. So I don't know if I'd even be alive if I had hung around.
Very true. Yeah. Were you into the drug culture at all or not really?
They all were. Yeah, I wasn't as bad as a lot of them. Yeah, but I yes, can't hardly not be, or alcohol or all. It's just almost everyone. There was very few people that didn't partake.
Did you have like a drug of choice or you just like drinking a lot?
No, yeah, I kind of like the opiates.
Would have been interesting if you went to WWF because Kerry goes as Texas Tornado goes to WWF. I wonder if they would have played off that at all with you and him, or if they would have done anything with you guys together.
Could have, actually, and that's a good point. I think that it could have. At that time, actually, when he was there, I was as big as him, so we would actually, at that time I was 300 pounds. So I think that it would have been an interesting, tag team. Maybe against each other or together. Who knows?
Was steroids like prevalent in world class too? Because I mean, obviously Kerry, but besides him, was it prevalent or just regular, hard drugs and stuff like that?
All of them took. I mean, not all, but many, many, many people took steroids on top of, on top of the other drugs, and everyone alcohol. We used to drive to the towns, and we would. I mean, everyone. You'd have 12 beers in you before you even got to the, to the ring. In those days, they didn't really check for. We got pulled over several times, and the police just let us go. But not that I'm aware of. Got a DUI or whatever you call it, like DWI. And I can imagine driving in the states after drinking even a couple of drinks today. I think that they put you in jail. No,
Yeah, oh yeah, they crack down on that big time nowadays. But the world class guys and the Von Erichs were like gods down there, right? I mean, you could do no wrong down in Texas.
pretty much. You know, and it's kind of weird because I actually got over as good as the Von Erichs. I was selling my picture, and that's really actually where I made my money was selling pictures. And I was smart because I had I don't know if you've ever seen any of the pictures, but I was in Israel, so I took a picture with the army with AK-47. I had a picture with a lion and a leopard, and so the pictures sold really well. I wouldn't have made it in wrestling if I hadn't got my picture money, and I only got a small percentage of it, but I made a lot of money from those pictures, and they kind of subsidized because the money at that time with world class got worse and worse and worse. I think I'd just missed the height of that Texas stadium when they brought me in. It was full, and then the second Texas, not the Texas stadium, but the second one they did in Fort Worth, and the convention center there just didn't draw a very big crowd, and so it just I was late by about 4 years, you know, so the money each it seemed like each month was a little bit less and a little bit less.
What do you think was the reasoning behind that? All like the craziness that was going on world class, or is it the fact that WWF was kind of taking over at that point?
Both, I think that both. The thing is that looking back as well, if Fritz had actually wanted to, he was in a position where he could have been just as big, if not bigger, with their, our promotion there as WWF. He just didn't want to, it was back in the days where there was all those territories, and I don't think he wanted to infringe on other, territories. So he was happy just to be where we were, and I think David Manning, I think Kevin, I don't know about Kerry, but I think Kevin because Kevin was much more involved in that side, but they all wanted to, just go out and, you know, actually take over, and they could have. We had real strong TV, especially at Channel 39, that religious station went all over the world. Huge in Israel. I used to go over there, not wrestling, but I used to go over there. I had a girlfriend at the time, and I used to go over and see her, and we would take boxes and boxes. You remember the old cameras that you could have an instant picture with?
Oh yeah, the Polaroids. Oh yeah.
Polaroid, yes. And so, we would charge back then. I had a friend of mine. We'd go around and take pictures with people, and I would pick them up, and take a picture with them and set the kid down. And back then, $10 a picture, and I could take 2,000 pictures in as many pictures as I could take in a day, and stand doing it, because you'd have to deal with like crowds and crowds and crowds of people. But it was just amazing how over that we were. The first time I went there was like 50,000 people at the airport. It was crazy. And in the book, I tell about, the book that I'd written, and actually it's done really well, but it has a little bit about the background of world class. And then the other part is, about, my travels, wrestling, but not about wrestling. We got bombed on a train in India. We got, Chris Adams tried to hijack a plane. Not really, but he headbutted the co-pilot. I rode a bicycle from South Africa to the Congo with two other guys. I used to run guns from the States to South Africa and got busted in the UK. So it's stories that happened whilst I was wrestling. Some of it in the States, but most of it, abroad. So,
Excellent book, Lance by Chance Wrestling as a Von Erich. Excellent book. Good stuff in there.
and I think it tells a little bit about, what it was like for somebody that, never, because I didn't aspire to be a wrestler. That wasn't my plan at all. It just kind of fell into my lap, and Um, a lot of the people that wrestled, their second generation, or they've always wanted to be a wrestler from the time that they were very young. And that wasn't the case with me. I was making really good money before I actually got into wrestling. Matter of fact, I remember George Weingroff and Gino Hernandez and some other people. They would say, "Why do you want to wrestle? Why would you do that? Don't go into the business." I drove up in a new Jaguar, and I just remember everybody wondering what the hell. And in my mind, I didn't know that what kind of money they were making. I thought it was a lot more.
Were they bitter towards you at all? Like, oh, what this guy's showing up in a Jaguar? You know what I mean? How much is he getting paid? We're getting nothing here.
No, I don't think that. I think that where they had a problem is that that I didn't pay my dues. I just walked right in. And they made Fritz used to make people come down and train with me. And obviously that's probably the last thing you want to do after you've driven all night, wrestled, and then driven all night to get back home. But nobody ever really, in front of me, nobody ever, made me feel like they had animosity. But I don't know if that's necessarily the case whenever they were, alone. But I certainly didn't hear it. And pretty much everybody treated me pretty well. I never really had a problem with anybody. I mean, because I was always nice and I was humble. I mean, I knew that it was a good opportunity for me, and a lot of people would have loved to have that opportunity. And so I didn't. I treated everybody well, and I actually wasn't like the other Von Erichs. I went out there and tried to work with them. I didn't like try to hurt them. And everybody used to say to me, please don't fucking hurt me.
So they were working a little bit snug and a little bit stiff with the opponents, the other Von Erichs?
You ask anybody, especially with Kevin, everyone hated to work with him. And not a little snug. They always said that they got hurt. And that's what that was. I think Kevin was better. I mean, sorry, Kerry was better. But I do know that Kevin used to like really, really potato people. That he would hurt them.
Any reasoning behind that, or just that's the way he worked?
That's the way he worked. I don't think he. I think in his mind too, he wanted it to look, authentic. And what do? If you're the promoter's son, and you're working against the promoter's son, you're going to actually, you're not going to complain. You're going to do it because you don't want to lose your spot.
Yeah, very, very true. What was your relationship like with Kevin? And do you have any sort of relationship like with him today?
Um, I wasn't, I didn't look, Carrie and I had much more in common than Kevin and I. And I'm sure, I mean, look, many, many years, Kevin's kind of, like, are you there?
Yep.
Okay, so I lost you for a second. I wasn't vindictive when I wrote the book. I could have said a lot more than I did, but I didn't want to throw anybody under the bus. He did what he did, and he talked. I know he did talk bad about me because I think he didn't understand why I just left. When they did, he in his mind, he did so much for me in his mind. And after I had written the book, he had actually watched a couple of interviews, and he wrote me and said he didn't know my side of the story, and when he had when he read not the book, but I don't think he read the book, but parts of the book that was sent to him. I think that he had a different light on things because he didn't realize how hard it was on me. He didn't see that part. You know, he didn't
Yeah.
have he didn't have to drive 8 hours twice a day, to get to these towns. He always did the towns that were close. I'm the one that actually, had to do the long haul, and I just don't think he realized it. So, you see a different perspective, and I would see a different perspective if I was him too. I wouldn't have even known what was going on, other than I show up 15 minutes before, my match, and I go work. I work and I go home. And I didn't travel 8 hours with a bunch of baby faces or a bunch of heels, and I didn't hear what was going on. I didn't feel what was going on. So I think that's a big difference. If you ask Hulk Hogan his experience in wrestling, and then you talk to somebody that's on the bottom of the card, that's making nothing, they're going to have a very different, view on, you know, than someone that's making a couple of $100,000 to wrestle a match, versus somebody that's made a couple of $100 to wrestle a match. One guy flies, the other guy actually drives. So, I mean, it's all in your perspective, right?
Definitely, and you're doing that. I mean, you're really paying your dues, and Kevin and Kerry are obviously, like you said, working close towns, not showing up to shows, so they could have been more understanding at the point, but like you said, they didn't even realize what was going on.
Yeah, of course. And then if you're also on top of that, if you're doing, you know, other recreational things, even less, you know, does that make
Yep.
sense?
Yeah, definitely, definitely, for sure. With Kerry, though, you did get along with him. You said you guys did have a good relationship.
Yeah, yeah, it was different because again, I had a lot in common with him. I was a national powerlifting champion. I was also in bodybuilding uh, before I got into the wrestling. It kind of messed me up once I did get in the wrestling. I wasn't able to do all that, obviously. Kerry was still able to work out because he only had to wrestle a couple of times a week, and it's very different. Anyway, so but we had that kind of the same kind of kind of background, because he was into bodybuilding and all that, and although he didn't, I don't think, compete. He just had a great body, and he truly had a great body. You know.
Oh yeah, he looked like a Greek god at
Mm-hmm.
one point. Yeah, he was
Mm-hmm.
huge.
Mm-hmm.
When
And
you,
yeah,
I was gonna say, with him, like you guys got along. Did you hang out with him at all, though?
did actually my ex and his um, wife were actually pretty good friends, and we used to go over his house. I never went over to Kevin's house. Couldn't tell you where he lived, but I used to go over to Carrie's house quite often. And we hung out. The thing is that we lived very far from each other, so it wasn't something that we did a lot. I was really good friends with Steve Simpson, and obviously, I spent a lot of time with Steve. He's still in Dallas today. I didn't go see him this last time I was there, but if somebody, I lived with his family in South Africa, and spent a few months with his dad, and I wrestled for his dad for a couple of years before he actually immigrated to the States. The father, the whole family actually immigrated, and so anyway, so yeah, they were good to me.
What about Mike? Did you have any sort of relationship with Mike Von Erich?
Mike and Chris were always together, and Chris was a lot younger, and I don't know, Mike just kind of kept to himself. I don't think he wanted to be in wrestling at all. I think his father actually pushed. Well, I know for a fact he pushed him, and especially Chris too. Chris had he had no business being in the ring. He was a little guy, and Mike also was pretty thin, and neither one of them wanted to have anything to do with wrestling. But you do what your father, he pushes you to do it, and he was. I mean, Fritz was very persuasive, and he was a tough guy. So I think that they were probably afraid of him.
Almost like they had to do it. Like there's no yes, no, maybe. You're in wrestling. You got to wrestle.
100%. And look what happened to the family. I mean, the only one that's left is Kevin, and I guarantee it was from all the pressure that they had. I mean, I'm not, I mean, that's my personal opinion. And, who knows if that's truly, why all that happened. But I have a feeling that he put so much, it couldn't have been good.
Obviously, David was dead before you came to the territory, but did you hear of like, hey, you're going to have to fall in David's footsteps? Because a lot of people say he was the best wrestler, the best worker out of them. So were that people were kind of saying, hey, you're going to have to fill, David's footsteps?
Not me. I think that actually it was probably more pressure on Carrie to actually, and Kevin to actually fall into or to actually follow David's footsteps. The difference was David was what I've heard was he was a true worker, and he actually, he could make it to his towns, and people liked him. Not a lot of people liked Kevin. Carrie was, different. Carrie was pretty simple in the fact that I mean, he had a pretty good sense of humor. Most everybody liked him. He was a likable guy. Kevin was a little more. Um, he was always cordial to me and nice to me, but I didn't warm up to him, and a lot of people felt that way, especially if they worked against him. Because you always had to make the Von Erich shine. And most of the heel. I remember, like Buzz Sawyer and Matt Bourne used to always tell me, they don't sell at all. They just go out and kick ass, and that's not the psychology of, the wrestling. The psychology is, you shine, and then the bad guy has to cheat. You know how it goes, and then the very end, if you're going to get beat, it was because the bad guy cheated to beat you because he had to. So good there versus evil, and I think that Kevin he wouldn't sell very much in the beginning, and just the rest of the match was him making comebacks.
Do you think that with them not working and stuff, I mean, does that lend to people wanting to leave the territory, or do you think like that was just bound to happen anyway? Like people were
Well,
leaving and going elsewhere.
well, I think that's part of what happens, but I think that especially if you're a baby face, there's no way that you're ever gonna get over on because there's not really a spot for him because it was all Von Erichs, and then I was kind of in between, meaning that I was not a Von, I they gave me a push. I didn't get beat in the middle of the ring, but there's like I remember Billy Jack Haynes. He thought I was insane for going to work for the Von Erichs, and he tried to work there, but and he was a difficult person. He was a great guy. Later in life, I think he kind of got a couple of screws loose, but he was a great guy. I mean, for me, I liked him a lot, and also great body. And when I first met him, when I was in Portland, I worked with him a lot. And I remember somebody asking him, would I keep my body? And he says, yeah, maybe, it's hard to when you're wrestling. He says, yeah, but if he goes to the, world class, he's not going to be able to keep it. And it was true. But he tried to make it at world class, and they wouldn't give him a push. They kind of, just kind of promised him something, and he got there, and it wasn't the case. And I think a lot of people, if they didn't turn, to heel, they just weren't going to make it there.
What did you think of the Fabulous Freebirds and working with those guys? Because obviously Von Erich's Freebirds, that's kind of what made the territory so hot at one point.
Well, yeah, I mean, that was a feud that went on for the whole time I was there between, Chris Adams and, um, with working with Gino and the Freebirds. I liked working with Terry Gordy, and I didn't care for, I like Buddy, and I like Terry Gordy. They were really good guys. Michael Hayes, I also didn't care for, and he wasn't, mean to me, or he worked with me. I just didn't care for him.
Any
Terry,
particular reason?
just didn't get the warm and fuzzies from him. I think he also felt like I didn't do, I didn't pay my dues. Where Terry Gordy was just a good worker. He did whatever they asked of him, he did. And he was a great worker. And Buddy, Buddy was also he was although he was drunk most of the time. I mean, really drunk. But he called a good match too. And Michael, I don't know, I just didn't. There's people in the business that I got along with most everybody. I truly did. But Michael and you know Kevin, and I think they were really good friends too. So that might have had something to do with it. They did like each other. So I don't know. Just looking back, I didn't have anything other than go out and work with him and do the best you can.
What about Fritz? Did you have a good relationship or any sort of relationship with Fritz?
Um, he was just no, actually, he was up in his office. And, you go up there and in the world class, and I'll never forget. I was watching, you know, um, uh, from Portland before I actually went to work in at the world class. I'll remember going to Portland, and I had a friend of mine come from Israel. And when I ended up going to the States, he actually came with me. And I'll never forget whenever we walked into the sportatorium, and I'd already been there, because it was, I mean, because that's how I got kind of, you know, uh, when they came and asked me to come wrestle, I had to go meet Fritz. And so, I knew what the inside of the sportatorium on the bottom floor where the ring was, but I remember my friend going and saying, oh my God, this is a famous world class sportatorium, because it looked like a fire trap, and his office was on the top floor. And man, it smelled. I remember going up in there, and he had ashtray after ashtray after ashtray. He was a chain smoker. And I just remember walking into the first time meeting him, and I couldn't even see him because there was so much cigarette smoke up there. And I remember he was smoking two cigarettes at the same time, and
Wow.
he was, I mean, he had a real kind of raspy voice, and, he was intimidating, wore his overalls or one of those, like he used to wear what mechanics would wear, those jumpers.
Yep.
And, and he was just no nonsense, and he wouldn't let you talk a lot of times. And, he just had a bad temper. I used to hear him scream at people, and I used to, look at Bronco Lubitsch. I liked him a lot. And I used to look at him, and he would just shake his head.
So, did you like Fritz though? Did you guys get along?
Um, I tolerated him. I was nice to him. Yeah, nah, he was kind of a bully. I tolerated him. I had to deal with him. Not much though. By the time I got there, he wasn't really running anything. It was mostly David Manning, and Ken Mantell. So it was, and Ken I liked a lot. I actually went to work when he pulled away from the world class. He tried to do his own thing called Wild West for a few weeks, and he got some of the talent from world class to come work over there. And I didn't think it would go anywhere. It just didn't feel like it was gonna do anything really. And that, I guess, it fizzled out before I actually actually when I left. They were still going when I left to go to South Africa. They were still kind of going. But he was a good guy. Ken Mantell I liked a lot. And he was very calm, and he had a good way with him. And David Manning as well. And I know he was very good friends with the Von Erichs, and he called a lot of the matches, him and Kim Mantell, and he helped me out a lot. I remember he used to tell me in the very beginning, he used to tell me what to do while he was actually, refereeing.
And he was the one that actually found you, right? Like he was the one that actually discovered you and kind of brought you into wrestling, right? David Manning?
Yeah, I was golfing and I just won Texas championship in bodybuilding, and so I was really cut up, and I was about, I guess, 250, but like really really cut up and had veins running through me. And I'll never forget, we were golfing, and he actually had seen me on the golf course, and I was wearing, it was a public golf course, so I was wearing shorts, and he kept following me around, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And one of my friends said, this guy must be gay. He came up to me looking at my legs. He wasn't even looking at me. And he said, hey, where are you from? Blah, 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 blah. Have you ever thought about wrestling? And I'm like, no, not really. And he goes, well, listen, this is my card. And if you have an interest, I can make you a lot of money. If you have an interest, come see me. And I remember going back to the gym telling people about it. And they're like, God, you ought to go. You have to go meet him at least. And, then I actually, about 2 weeks later, I actually called him and said, I'll come see you. And that's where I met him at the Sportatorium.
And you got introduced to the beautiful sportatorium, which is funny because I'm up from the Northeast. But if you think about it and the way it's talked about, you would think it's like the greatest venue of all time. But so many of the guys, when they actually go there, are like, it was not the nicest place in the world.
Look, it not only not the nicest, it looked like it was going to burn up. If you looked at the lighting, that ran through there on the wires, I mean, the exposed wires, and everything was wood. And I mean, the first time that and the funny thing is, I actually went with another friend of mine. We sat in the cage. There's a cage. I don't know if you ever been to the Sportatorium, but there was a cage upstairs that you could actually sit in, and actually nobody could actually get to you because you're in a cage. So people that like the wrestlers, um, um, family would be there, or friends would sit there. And so it was a private place you could sit. They could still talk to you through the wires, because it looked like, like a fence, but like smaller, little holes in the thing. So you could see out, you could see in, but you couldn't grab it. You could stick your finger through each hole maybe. And I remember the first week we were there, I mean, the first time I came and watched, Waylon Jennings was sitting next to me. And I don't know if you know who he is or not, but he, you
Oh
know,
yeah, famous singer.
yeah, I didn't know who the hell he was. And, but I was sitting next to him, and he was saying, hey, listen, are you wrestling? Or at that time I said, no, 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 I'm just here, and him and another guy, I don't know who it was, and their wives were sitting there and, watched the wrestling. So we had a lot of people that, that were well known, that would come watch the wrestling up there, so it was pretty big. Um, in the time that I was wrestling, I got Debbie Harry, I actually
Oh yeah.
I got to know her, and actually fairly well. Uh, Tanya Tucker, got to know her pretty well. I got to meet, and this is in Texas, I got to actually meet some of these people just because of they were Von Erich fans, or they'd seen the Von Erichs, and so it was kind of interesting. When I started, I couldn't go to a restaurant without, you know, I mean, it was just as I could have been with, and it happened. I was with Sylvester Stallone in Israel at the same time, and we were just as big as Sylvester Stallone.
Wow.
I mean, it's so in Texas and in the Middle East, it was crazy. Couldn't go anywhere without, I mean, you couldn't eat, every time you put your fork in your mouth, that you'd have somebody wanting to, get a signature, and where I made my money too, the kids didn't want to do, and they did let me do a lot as far as like commercials, and like autograph signing, because if I had just tried to live on the wrestling alone without the picture money or the autograph signing and that, I wouldn't have made money, but I was getting $2,000 for each weekend if I went someplace on a Saturday to sign autographs, or I got a free car from every 6 months for doing commercials on television for Ford.
Wow.
So that was the part that kind of made it tolerable. If not, I don't think I could have lived on the money just from the wrestling alone.
But I think the funny thing is, it's like you're not really a Von Erich. You're not really related to them. How does Fritz kind of make that pitch to you originally and say, "Hey, you look great. You got some seasoning, or you're going to get some seasoning from Don Owen." But how does he turn you into Von Erich? Like, is that just his idea, or is it David Manning's idea?
No, it actually was. The problem was they were desperate for somebody, and they needed somebody that kind of looked like them. So they were looking for somebody that had blonde hair or semi blonde hair, and they were looking for somebody that was could have you know passed for a cousin. And so I don't think that they actually thought it out. And I heard him on an interview say he was against it, which I don't really believe that. I think that actually they were desperate because they needed to find somebody to actually fill that hole. And looking back too, the hardest part for me was doing the interviews. I just didn't have enough practice to do the interviews. And that's also something you have to learn. I went on to like make movies in South Africa, and I got a lot of work in South Africa because I have I had a American accent, so I got to do a lot of movies, and it's very different learning your lines and versus just getting up there and ad libbing.
Right.
And I had a hard time. I didn't later on, but at that time, it was very difficult because I just didn't have enough practice. And the Von Erichs were horrible at doing it too. If you look at their interviews, they were horrible.
They
And
just had so much charisma. The crowd loved whatever the heck they were saying. It's like the Ultimate Warrior for a while. Whatever he said, they just ate it up because they liked them.
yeah, you can say anything. I mean, then they all did like me a lot, until I was no longer a Von Erich. And those people to this day, they're such diehard Von Erich fans that, it's crazy. They feel like I'd betrayed, the family. If you ever look, and I don't, I did once. I looked on one of the threads where they had the Von Erich fans, and with some of the shit that they said. And I never looked at it again because I just thought how stupid, you know. And people want to believe what they want to believe. But in those days, you take any of the wrestlers, all it's all a work. Everybody was that said they were related. It was very few that were really related, but it's all fake. The wrestling's fake, but back then, it bubblegum for the eyes, but people wanted to believe it. Now everybody knows it's fake.
And the thing is, Waldo Von Erich and Fritz Von Erich are supposedly brothers. You're Waldo's son, so you're the cousin. But none of that is true.
Of course not. And the same thing is, it's just, I can't, right now, I can't think of, but, like the Wyndhams, okay, they're, Blackjack Mulligan and that whole family, they are really related. The Hearts are really related, but the majority of, people that were supposed to be, related weren't. It's just part of the business, and nobody came out and said, "Hey, they're really not related to me," because it was stupid. Nobody would have been looking back if they had just not said anything. Hey, Lance is retired, or Lance got hurt. Then none of that would have ever happened. They would have. Nobody would have been the wiser. They would have just carried on with life. And again, I think that the reason was they were afraid that I was gonna, better to get out in front of it because they thought I was gonna, either go someplace else or maybe, like WWF or someplace, and or do a full expose like Eddie Mansfield did.
But do you think that ended up hurting World Class? Because it's almost like, wait, the Von Erichs were in on the lie saying that Lance was the cousin.
No, I don't think. I know it's the most stupid thing they could have possibly ever done because for you're always going to have people that, for instance, that love Trump, and no matter what he does, they're going to love him. And the Von Erichs had that following that people are going to love the Von Erichs no matter what. But there's a lot of people that say, well, hey, look, you know, shame on you because you're the ones that actually, orchestrated that whole thing. I was just a person that was offered the job and I took it. Anybody would have, if they thought it was going to, help their career. No,
Did,
I mean,
oh, yeah,
and
definitely.
and so I think that that was the worst thing that they could have possibly done for the business. The worst, and I don't know how, you can't ask any of them because they're all dead. But or except for Kevin, and he's not gonna tell you what he thinks. Well, he may tell you, but he's gonna spin it very differently, I'm guessing. And I don't, like I said, I don't have anything against him. I just wasn't close to him. So I don't know what his rationale was. Like I said, I was gone, but I think that it really hurt them. And there's a lot of other things that I think were also the demise of the world class. Um, but I think that the biggest part would be that, and also the Von Erichs not actually, going from coast to coast because they could have done it. They had the TV to do it. They had everything set up to do it.
Definitely, but it seemed like all the tragedies. Obviously, Mike had like uh, toxic shock, and he ends up dying, and Chris commits suicide, and you know what I mean. Like Gino is dead. Obviously, David was dead first, but I mean, it was just like one tragedy after another. Then the Von Erichs are lying to them this whole time. Like that was like the final straw.
Yeah, of course. I mean, all of that played all of it actually had something to do with the fall of the Von Erichs. And the world class wrestling. It's a shame because they really, really could have done something. And it is what it is. I mean, what if? What if they'd done everything differently? If I had been paid better, I and only had to wrestle because even once a night, if you're doing that 6 nights a week, sometimes 7 nights a week, it's a huge toll on you. Even though it's fake and all that, the miles and the bumps that you take, you get rings that don't have any bounce to them at all. You got people hitting your head with a chair. You got rings that are hard as a rock. You get you know knocked out in a by somebody throwing you into a post, or not catching you. When you go flying over the top rope. There's a lot of stuff that happens to you. My shoulder to this day, from Nord the Barbarian actually throwing me into the mat, just dropping me. I broke my shoulder, and I used to could be able to bench close to 600 pounds, and now I can't even. I still work out, but I can't bench because of the injury that I had. I can't even put my shoulder, my arm over my head on my left hand side.
Wow, crazy. So, do you have any just like positive experiences from world class, or maybe from wrestling in general?
$100,000 a year, I don't think that it's worthwhile. And a lot of people would like to make $100,000 a year wrestling because I doubt if they're even coming close to that. And then you got to pay your expenses.
Yeah. So you're probably making maybe half of half of that, really. I
Yeah,
mean, yeah. Like, do you have any like positive experiences from wrestling and from like world class, or not really?
yeah, I do. Yes, because it opened me up to a whole new world. I'm sure I would have never gone to Israel. I'm sure that it made me want to be a huge traveler. I've been to 122 countries. And I don't know if I would have done any of that. I don't think I'd have. Maybe I wouldn't have. There's. I think there was a huge positive to that as well. Because it opens your eyes to a different type of world. So there was some good things about it as well. And it made me appreciate hard work. And the thing is that a lot of those wrestlers, especially the ones that were in the undercards, they could have worked in Walmart and made more money, and been at home every night. you
Right.
know Kind of sad. It gave me a drive that I don't think I would have had. Yeah, there's a lot of positives. I learned how to, even though I learned how to be a better business person, because you have to kind of negotiate your own stuff. If you don't, you're not going to make money in the business. I mean, during those days. So I went and sold myself, to be able to, to do a lot of different things to make money. So yeah, I have some positives. Yeah, I just wish that I had maybe stayed in Portland longer to actually, to get more experience. Because if you're on a, on international a television station that goes worldwide, I mean, they see everything that happens. If you're on the West Coast in Portland and Washington, it's if you mess up, it's not a big deal.
Right. You almost get some of that inexperience out of the way, get that rust out of the way, and be able to be a little green. And then once you make it to the big time and are seen globally, you're going to be more polished.
Of course, and that's with anything. Um, it's same with any sport that you do. You got to put your time in. I mean, even though you're a fast runner or whatever, you can't just go try out for the Dallas Cowboys or the Rams. You're just not going to be able to walk on and do it. You need to have some experience first, and it's the same way. To with wrestling, and especially just with the learning how to do interviews and that, because there's some people that are horrible wrestlers, but they were good at talking, and they made a good living because they could talk really well. They could do great interviews.
With you, and as we wind it down, head towards the finish, did you think that wrestling like was for you per se? Did you think like, oh, this is my calling, or that was never a thought? It was just a job.
I truly, I actually, in my, it wasn't my calling, and it wasn't something I just wanted to be famous, and I thought that was a way to actually go maybe to the film industry. It wasn't so I could wrestle to be a great wrestler. If it happened and I could make really good money at it, then you know what? Then it would be, I mean, it would have worked out okay. And it did. I mean, I actually made a lot of money wrestling in South Africa, and I got to be home every night. I didn't have to go to sometimes we'd go to Angola, or we'd go to Rhodesia, Zimbabwe now, we Nigeria. We'd go to some of these other places, and but I didn't have to go. If I wanted to go and chose to go because I hadn't been there before, it was a good experience. But the wrestling there was completely different, in South Africa. And I was over in South Africa, you know. So that I had a great time, and I had a 15-year career of that, So I actually really enjoyed it.
When you look back at your career, like what do you think is, or even acting too, because I know you did some acting. What's like the legacy, or what do you think is like the stamp when people like, remember like Lance Von Erich? What do you think?
Yeah, well, it depends on where we're talking about. Are we talking about the states? Or are we talking about South Africa?
Everything combined.
The states, probably I'll be known as the guy that actually um, left world class and was stupid because I left and I held them up for money, and and I wasn't a true Von Erich. And I think that's my legacy in Texas. I don't think they're going to remember. Most people aren't going to remember, um, um, the matches or anything that I had there. I mean, I really don't. But in South Africa, I think it's completely different. I think that I was so well known because I also did television, and I did you know uh, soap opera. I did I did tons of commercials, so they saw me on the television a lot, and so I was a true celebrity there, and really well known and thought of as you know uh, I'm a South African citizen and thought of as a good guy that did charity work and did a lot for the community. And it's a smaller country too, so it's actually and there was only 6.5 million whites, so everywhere you go people knew you, and it was just as big as the States. It's just a smaller country.
Seems like even like now, if you like look back, it's like okay, everybody kind of should be a little bit more at ease or relaxed about Lance Von Erich, 'cause you always hear like, "Oh, like they throw that name and they put that towards like the tragedies of world class." It's like, let's not go crazy. You know what I mean? They're like they almost put that in the same category. So I think hopefully people are easing up on that 35, 40 years later. I hope anyway.
Well, you would think so, and those people were in their 50s and 60s and 70s that actually watch the wrestling. If they can't get over it, I mean, tough luck for them, and it doesn't bother me a bit. I don't care. It's not like I'm every day in Dallas. And, I remember, Brian Adidas, he actually, he works in as a meat cutter in Safeway, and there's nothing wrong with that, at all. And I'm not saying there is, but, it's like, I remember he reached out to the guy that wrote the book, helped me co-write the book, Barry Vinny, and he told Barry Vinny to tell me that he said he admired me because I really handled that situation very good. It was on them that they didn't, and I was a good friend of Brian's. We myself and Steve Simpson and Brian, we always used to ride together, and I got a lot of respect for him because he was a good wrestler and he never got a really big push, but he has to deal with whether it be good or bad. He has to deal with a lot of people, because I can imagine working in a Safeway as a butcher, that you run into a lot of people that were world class fans, and so he has to deal with that on a daily basis. I don't have to. If I walked into Dallas right now, nobody's going to know me. South Africa is a very different story. Everybody knows me, but they people forget. You're even really famous people. You're very famous, and then you're only as famous as your last movie or your last soap opera or whatever. And people forget about you, don't think about you at all. And anyway, my point being though is that I could care less what they think. If they like me and they read the book, and maybe they read the book and they didn't like me, they read it because they just want to see what the hell. Great, read it. Maybe you'll have a different perspective on on my because you only know you don't know what you don't know, and you only know what you hear. So if you read something and you really can put yourself in the other person's shoes, they might see it differently. And I have had people write me and say, listen, I never never really knew what happened, and thanks for writing the book because it told your side of the story. We only got one side.
Yep. For all those years, only got the one side. Lance by Chance, Wrestling as a Von Erich. Great book. Get out there, everybody, and find it. I think it's on Amazon and other places. And go read it at lancebychance.com. But I didn't want to get too into the Chris Adams stories and the other story because I want people to actually go out and get the book because that's some really interesting stuff. You getting arrested. I mean, a lot of interesting stuff in the book outside of just wrestling.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's a lot to do with wrestling and the kind of the underbelly of world class as well. And it's, even if you don't like me, the stories about the other guys are actually, it's pretty interesting. It's from my perspective, and I didn't, I told the truth. I mean, about the drugs, about everything. It's not, because some people would say, why did you tell that? And it's because it's what happened. So read the book, not even if you don't like me or care. Read it because it's interesting about some of the other wrestlers as well. And you can order it, just so you know. You can go to Lance by Chance and go Google it, and it'll pull you up to Vinny's site, and he'll have a book to you in a couple of days. So I think it's $24, something like that. It's got a lot of pictures in there too.
Nice. What do you? What's up next for you? Anything, or just working, relaxing, and golfing?
Fishing, golfing, traveling. I don't know. I'm actually gonna. I think I'm gonna write a second. Gonna attempt to write a second book. It took 2.5 years
Oh wow.
to actually put this whole thing together. But I got an idea of something that, and I'm not going to give it away right now, but that actually would be pretty interesting and has nothing to do with wrestling. So
Nice. Looking forward to that. Of course, like I said, lancebychance.com for more. Lance, thank you so much for all the time. I
thanks
appreciate
for
it
having
tonight.
me. Sorry, I'm in the dark here, but I'm outside with bats flying around. So
Hey,
yeah,
no problem.
okay, all
But
right.
thank you, though.
Thank
Appreciate
you
it.
so much.